Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the third day of training. Today we have the third two sessions for you. Before going into the sessions, we would like to let you know that before the sessions, during the breaks, and after the sessions, you can actually meet each other in the lounge. And we have seen that people are sitting sometimes in separated tables, so you can choose to sit at the same table, or you can also click in Start Speed Networking, and then you will be connected with somebody else if somebody else click that. So that's just an invitation in case you want to know the other attendees of the training. And this first session today, where we have Rajiv Rajani and Alvaro Aranz to talk about the i4Trust components for identity management and access control. But before starting, I want to give the word to Juanjo. Please, Juanjo, go ahead.
Thank you, Jane. We need to make an announcement about a change in the program because we were experiencing a problem with the cluster that was that is going to be used for the demo and some of the presentations performed tomorrow. Therefore, we need to swap, and the session that was planned to run tomorrow will take place on Friday. And then the session that we had planned to have on Friday for questions and answers will take place tomorrow. So I repeat, tomorrow the session will be for questions and answers, and the one on Friday would be on the with the program that was planned for Thursday, tomorrow, in the case that we are not able to repair the cluster. So we will be working alone today to repair the cluster. In case we manage to do so, then the plan doesn't change. But if we still need another day, then we will swap and implement this change I was describing. We will send a message later this evening in the DIH working group space, and there we will announce what is going to finally happen. So please stay tuned, and we will inform you through that channel what is going to happen finally tomorrow and Friday. And that was all. Sorry for the inconvenience this may cause, but and this is a problem that has nothing to do with us. It was a bit with the infrastructure from the Google Cloud cluster we have ready. But yes, we hope we can repair and recreate this the whole environment in a new cluster, hopefully today, in which case nothing changed as explained. Otherwise, we will implement this swap. Thank you. And then I give the floor to Rajiv
Yes.
to start the session today, and I hope you will all enjoy that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanjo, and thank you, Jane. Good morning and very welcome to all. Today, as Jane mentioned, we are going to have a bit deep dive in the i4Trust identity and access management, and of course, access control. The first part of the session, we are going to explain you the concepts that iShare brings. The solution in the iShare, which is based on the trust framework, and the identity and access control mechanisms that it provides. And in the second part, then we will also explain how 5R components are that comply with iShare specifications are actually implemented, and that will be taken care by my friend Alvaro. Okay, beginning. A brief recap of the roles in the data space. Again, if you remember that we have a trust provider which enables the trust in the data space, and in the between you see the green blocks, which are the parties who are interested in exchanging data. And at the bottom you see the yellow blocks. Today we are primarily focused, our both sessions are primarily focused on the yellow blocks, and of course a bit on trust provider, how it enables seamless identity and access management across the data space. Another short recap of the iShare role model, which is of course similar to what we have seen in previous slide. Again, here these are the three roles: identity provider, iShare satellite, and authorization registry, which together enables the trust and identity and access. So a quick introduction to iShare satellite. It's a federated and certified role. It is essentially an list of participants. It onboards participants in the data space, and it maintains that list along with its statuses. So that's a place, and on top of it, it exposes the APIs for all the participants so that they can query on another participant details as well as the status of that participant. Additionally, what it enables primarily is multilateral trust, because when you sign up on a satellite, you sign a contract, and other party joining that satellite also signs the same contract, which means that you both agree on the same terms of use, and you have agreed to the same terms of use. That means that you can trust each other in that sense, that you will follow and abide by the things that are mentioned in that. And that is the basis on which you start to enable trusting each other. And of course, it also plays facilitator role in terms of making business agreements, operational agreements, data model agreements. So that's the sort of the glue in the data space, where you can make sure that the common agreements across the participants, which applies to all the participants in different roles, that can be published with the satellite or with the trust provider, and every participant who joins then has an easy access and single source of access to that common agreements. And of course, in data spaces which integrate and interoperate with each other, the trust provider or the satellite plays the role of the part of the governing body, because when you combine all the data spaces, they all have the same trust provider or satellite, but with a little bit differences in terms of business agreements, operational agreements pertaining to that data space. But in the end, they all interoperate, and that's how we make sure that a lot of data spaces can interoperate with each other. Right. Quick recap again on the identity provider. In iShare, the identity provider is based on eIDAS framework, and it is also based on OpenID Connect standard, which enables in all cases. So OpenID Connect, of course, we know from sign in with Google and sign in with Facebook, for example. That's usually B2C space, but we made a little bit of adjustment to make sure that it fits. The standard is fitting for B2B, B2G, and government to government, or even government to citizen space as well. And based on eIDAS framework, so that makes sure that there is enough level of assurance is provided, and there are standard way of making those assurances available for identities, and also for the authentication mechanism, there is level of assurance. Right. Another role, that is authorization registry or authorizations provider. So in iShare, what we specify is the APIs of the authorization registry, that is just the request response model of the of the authorization provider. But on the back, you can see that any organization can play that role, or a third party can provide this role by just implementing a policy database. But if it is an existing organization who wants to play this role, then it can combine, or it can determine authorization on the fly from either a policy database or a backend system, or there are existing authorizations in LDAP or Active Directories, or they can combine them. The only thing that they need to do is to make a logic available which can determine which source to use for the question being asked, right? And then response accordingly to the participant. So this enables you to reuse some of the existing authorizations that you may have, and you can also use any language to define a policy at the back. On the other hand, you can also use your role-based access controls, and you can convert them into a response based on that to when a question is asked, right? We will also go through in a bit detail in the steps, but just an example of how the request response model looks like in Authorization Registry. I think this is a bit not clear, but yeah. So this well, the request response model is actually based on XSEML standard, but XSEML is of course XML based standard, and while we use REST API, so we created a JSON version of it, and well, the attributes are comparable to XSEML standard, and you can see here that this is an example of a fine-grained authorization, where you can specify the range when this policy is valid. Then you have the issuer who issued the policy, and you have the subject to whom this policy is applicable. You also have delegation depth, by which you can control how much further down the line a delegation of this authorization can happen. And you also attach the data license here, which determines the usage conditions. Though these are not normally these conditions are basically covered in the legal terms of use. So the data consumer has to make sure that it abides by it. Additionally, there could be that there is technical enforcement implemented for such a usage control, but that's not necessary because you are legally bound to do that anyways, right? And then the policy structure comes in, where you have the type identifiers and attributes, which are free text fields. So here you can determine your resource, exact resource, or you can also use wildcards to determine multiple resources that are for which you want to give access to. And then you can specify the actions that that are allowed on that resource. So it's basically crude create, update, read, delete, which you can specify. Optionally, you can also specify at which service provider or which data provider this policy applies. So you can also restrict it per data provider, and this is where you specify specifically the access rights, the permit. So this is an example of fine-grained authorization, where the attributes are specified specifically in the container with the ID. And next, you can see a very coarse grain. So you can see that there are all stars here. So it's all wildcard based attributes. So you can give a more policy which is open, that it allows certain participant to do a lot of actions on behalf of you, right? Okay. Then going to the actual interaction on the data exchange, we see primarily two kind of exchange that can happen. One is machine-to-machine interaction, which is primarily when you have backend systems connecting with each other of different organizations and automating or even while automating the workflows. So there you need the machine identities who can interact with each other and exchange data in a trusted way. So we'll have a walkthrough of one fictional use case soon. And then you have, of course, the human-to-machine involvement, where human identity identifies itself and accesses a service from a portal from data provider. So we'll also have a look at a use case on that. Right. But before we dive into those use cases, I will briefly explain the concepts of the very basics of any IAM transaction and the technologies we use here. So it's a PKI certificates, JWTs, and JWTs are basically then client assertion, but then with specific attributes as we have specified in the standard. And that is used to get access token, because for any interaction that you want to start between two machines, this is the basic step that will always be there. So a certificate, what is a certificate? It's a digital file that proves the ownership of public key. It's based on the PKI infrastructure standard. And certificate provides you the information of the owner, so it has some details about the owner. It is issued by a third-party certifying authority, which is in a trusted route. So you can before issuing a certificate, it does some validations on the party who is asking for that information for that certificate, and it verifies the information that is being put in the certificate or in the digital file. And with that certificate, you can either sign something or you can encrypt something, depending on the type of certificate. So we rely on those certificate, which is also defined in EIDAS framework as well. So as I was explaining, there is the public part of the certificate, where you have the public key and the information of the organization. And then there is a private part, which is the private key, which only the organization has in its own control. It is never shared outside. And usually you can recognize a certificate by its by the file extension. A full certificate, for example, is a P12 certificate, whereas only a public certificate, one example is .cer. There are other formats as well, but it is just to give you an example, right? So iShare, as I mentioned, relies on the PKI certificate to verify organizational identities. So we recognize EIDAS certificates in iShare, and in Europe you can get an EIDAS certificate from a local certified certification authority, and more kind of certificates are possible to be added. But they have to meet certain standards and certain level of assurances in order to be part of, because you trust the other party based on the signature based on these certificates. So in general, then the digital file is used to sign and encrypt the files or the data that is being sent across with each other. You need a private key to sign data, and the public and the public key is how you know from which organization it belongs to, right? In iShare, when we say X5C value, that is the base 64 string of the certificate, because it's a digital file. That is how you put that in. As you will see later on in JWT, there is an attribute called X5C, where you will have to put the digital certificate. Though our remark, P12 file always contains the private key as well, so it is never supposed to be shared outside your organization, because then anyone else can impersonate you in that sense. So you have to protect that P12 file very well. The basic concept of certificate, you have some data or some file, and you use a private key and an algorithm to sign that data. Then it becomes signed data or signed file, and that signed file can be verified using public key with the same algorithm. Then you know for sure that that private key holder actually signed it, and that forms the basis of trust, because when I sign something on a paper, it's my signature. And if I have pre-registered and I've signed in front of you, for example, in physical world today, you know that this is my signature, and you can compare the signatures and trust that, okay, I did the signature. But in when it comes to digital world, that's not possible, right? So the digital file here makes sure that you can sign with private key, and using the public key you can verify, okay, who was actual signer of that file. And public key has the information entered by the certified authorities, which is already validated. So that's how you can trust that, right? So I hope that this is clear to everyone for the certificate part. Then we move on to the next part. That's a JSON Web Token. JSON Web Tokens are nothing but JSON objects, but they have a specific format. A basic JWT contains is actually a base 64 encoded string, and it has 3 sections which are concatenated by a dot. So 3 sections basically are, first is of course the header of the JSON, where you specify some attributes about the JWT. Then you have the payload, which is where your data or your file or any kind of content is that you want to send to the other party. And the third element is the signature. In the signature is where you specify, okay, this data is signed by me, so it can be trusted, and it protects its integrity, because even if any of the attributes in header or payload has changed, the signature must change as well. Otherwise it will not validate, right? So when you give the input like this in proper attributes, the base 64 encoded output becomes like this. Same happens with the payload, and then you use a signature, which then comes like this. As I explained with the digital certificate, the signature is you usually use SHA 256 algorithm, for example, and your private key, and then sign the header plus payload, and then that results into a signature specifically for this JWT, right? And to form it a complete JWT, you concatenate them using a dot in between, so you can see that these 3 sections are combined now. That in total becomes a JWT which you need to send across. So in iShare, clients assertions are basically JWTs, but with specific header and payload attributes which iShare has defined. So in header, we require that the algorithm is always RS256, and the type is JWT. And XYZ, as I explained earlier, the digital public key public certificate value that you need to place here. And for the payload, at least these are the basic attributes that you always need to have. And of course, on top of it, there might be additional attributes you might want to add. But that depends on the use case that we are there. But a quick look at the attributes that are specified. The issuer is the EORI number of the issuer, so who is issuing this JWT. The subject should be equal to issuer. For now, that's kind of reserved in this situation. The JTI is the identifier of the JWT. It's a randomly generated alphanumeric string. We do not specify how you generate it, but it has to be sort of unique. And then issued at, so when was this JWT issued, or when was this JWT created? Not before. So when is this JWT valid? Most of the times it's equal to IIT, but sometimes you want to have a separate value. And the expiration is 30 seconds plus the not before. So this making sure that when we are talking about client assertions, it's only valid for 30 seconds. This is to make sure that the client assertion cannot be used in replay attacks, because if someone sniffs on the network and gets hold of your JWT, it can probably try to do a replay attack, and to avoid those kind of situations. We think 30 seconds is fair enough time for a JWT to be valid, and the receiving party should make sure that it does not accept expired JWTs. So this is the Unix timestamp that it needs to verify. And here is the audience. Audience is the party for whom it's the other party for whom you are creating this JWT, or to whom you are sending this JWT. Right. Now looking at how does this process works, you have the header values, you have the payload values, and then you use the RS256 algorithm, and you use your private key and to sign it, and the signed JWT together is known as client assertion in iShare, but it is basically your identity token that you present to the other party when you are trying to connect. Right. So this is your signed identity token that you present, like saying, okay, hey, I am this. These are my credentials, or these are my details, and I sign it with my digital certificate, so you can trust or you can validate if what I'm saying is correct, because the issuer here, the identifier here should be also present in your digital certificate. Right. Yeah. So quick look at how when two parties are connecting, this is the first thing that they do. Like, hey, these are my details, and they connect at a particular endpoint, and they actually do that with sending a client assertion or a JWT which has those details and which is a signed JWT. So based on these details, the service provider or data provider can identify who that party is. And well, the specification for a token endpoint is specifically in this format. There are a few attributes that you need to make sure that grant type is always client credentials. This is also based on OAuth, by the way. The scope is iShare when you want to connect to other party using iShare mechanism. The client ID, of course, is the ID of the party who is trying to connect. And this is the assertion type. So you are specifying which kind of assertion type you are using. In iShare, we specify only this type. And of course, the JWT sits here in that request body. And once the service provider validates it, it can issue an access token based on that, which can be, of course, valid for 1 hour, for a day, or for a few minutes. It depends on the service provider how it wants to choose that. And of course, it can specify what the token type is. Right. So this was the brief introduction to all the basics, which we'll see that you will understand in the fictional use case now, that how this when two parties are connecting using the token connect token endpoint, this is behind the scenes. This is what is also happening. Now to explain to you the how two machines can interact, or how human to machine can interact, I'm explaining it with a fictional use case. So in this use case, you will see that there is an ABC trucking company who is a transporting company, and there is a banana and company who is an importer of bananas, of course, and there is a warehouse where typically the container lands, and then banana company asks the transporter to pick up that container on its behalf. Normally, any kind of interaction that happens, because warehouse has business connection with banana and company, and banana and company has another business connection to transporter. Normally when transporter wants to get any detail from the warehouse, say for example, what is the ETA of the container, or if it wants to have access to the container premises, it normally has to call back to banana and company, because transporter does not have direct relation to warehouse, but it is actually sort of the transporter of banana and company. So in today's world, the transporter reaches out to banana and company reaches out to warehouse, and either it arranges for the access or it gets the data from it, and then it passes on to the transporter, which is, of course, as you can see, very inefficient. And transporter is always relying on banana and company, and it's a very inefficient process. It cannot also schedule or better plan its own transport trucks, for example, and that's one of the key reasons we know that a lot of transport companies run empty trucks on the road, right? So what is easily enabled here is that the banana and company can delegate its rights to the ABC trucking, and ABC trucking can then directly get the details it requires from the warehouse, but only the details that banana company allows it to access on its behalf, right? So we will see now two cases. In first case, it's a machine of the ABC trucking company. It wants to get the ETA of the container from warehouse 13, so it knows when to send the truck there. So here the example, the parties here are, of course, as I explained, the banana and company is the importer or freight owner. The warehouse 13 is the warehouse or the terminal where the container is, and the ABC trucking is the transporter who is responsible for transporting. And Ask Me Anything is an authorization registry or the authorizations provider where banana and company can register the authorizations, right? So let's see the steps that needs to happen. But before all those happens, one thing is that the parties who have implemented iShare, they can on a regular basis, like a daily basis, get the list of all the trusted list of certifying authorities. So as I explained to you, that we currently specify the eIDAS certificates as trusted certificates. So there are a lot of certifying authorities who provide eIDAS certificate, and that list is sort of changing. Well, not on daily basis, but on regular basis, because new CA can enter or existing CA can move out. And of course, as and when needed, we can also add other kind of such certificates or certifying authorities in the network to be trusted. So the satellites maintain that list, and every iShare participant who implements that then can prefetch it on sort of a scheduled basis, and keep a local copy of the trusted CAs at their end. So this is just explaining that. Then we will move into the machine-to-machine use case. So here you can see the entitled party or the banana and company first delegates its rights or specifies the authorization for ABC trucking that it has access to the container XYZ. So it specifies which identifier of the container it has access to, and this happens between the authorization registry and banana and company beforehand. And this is, as you can see, it's marked in red, which is not necessarily specified in iShare how exactly this has to be arranged. It can be arranged in different ways, right? So this is the first step. And then it also informs ABC Trucking, hey, I registered your authorization at this Authorization Registry. So you can, whenever you go to warehouse 13, you can inform them that the authorizations are present here, right? So the next step, this is when the ABC Trucking company wants to get the ETA from the warehouse 13. But before it can ask for ETA, it needs to identify itself and validate and get an access token. So here you can see the arrow has changed into black, which is what we say that it is specified. So this call has to be as per the specification. So as you remember that I explained the client assertion, this is basically the same call there, the connect token with the client assertion. So ABC Trucking first generates the client assertion, signed client assertion, and it sends it at this endpoint on warehouse 13 to identify itself. That's its identity token. The next step, warehouse 13 first does the basic validation on the JWT. It checks the certificate which was used to sign the JWT, and if all the validation passes, then it proceeds in the next step. The next step is it also wants to make sure that ABC Trucking is also an iShare participant, because the ABC Trucking send identity token with iShare scope. So warehouse 13 needs to check if the data consumer will abide by the terms and conditions. So it wants to check whether it is an active participant or not. So again here, the first step would be that service provider connects to satellite. Then it uses the same connect token mechanism. But here, the client assertion is generated by service provider for itself, and it sends to satellite to identify itself. And the same process follows at the satellite. Satellite validates the JWT, it validates the certificate. And since it has a database of all the participants, it knows, okay, warehouse 13 is a registered participant, so it can issue an access token to it, so that it knows, okay, who is connecting to it, right? Then once it gets access token, the warehouse 13 can ask details of ABC Trucking, right? So it gets that using parties endpoint, where you can specify the party ID which was sent by ABC Trucking, that, okay, I need details of this party. Then iShare satellite then can send response in the party token, where it gives the detail of ABC Trucking as it is registered in the satellite, and also its current status, whether it's active, revoked, or whatever status it can be. So given that it is active, and then the service provider checks that, okay, all the things are correct, the certificate is correct, the JWT is correct, then it issues an access token to ABC Trucking, so that it can follow the step. So this is the basic step of identification and authentication, right? Now comes the part where ABC Trucking is invoking a specific service at the service provider, which is about getting the ETA of the container, right? So it is asking, okay, can I get access to the ETA of container Z? And it also specifies that my authorization can be found at Ask Me Anything registry, right? So it sends, and again here this is a red call, because this means that this is a existing service or a new service from the service provider or data provider. It's an existing API or any kind of integration endpoint that can be invoked using the access token that it received in the previous step, right? So yeah, sorry. Yeah. So the service provider then checks the details of the request, and it accordingly starts the process. So then, because the ABC Trucking specified that the authorizations can be found at Ask Me Anything Authorization Registry. Then Warehouse 13 wants to first check if there is actually an authorization. So it tries to connect to Ask Me Anything. Again, the same process follows. It first needs to get the token from Ask Me Anything. And once it gets the token, then it can ask the Authorization Registry. So here it is sending the client assertion of itself. Ask Me Anything follows the same process. It does the check of the JWT and the certificate. If everything checks out, then it can validate if with iShare Satellite if the Warehouse 13 is a recognized party, and so it gets the access token first, and then it asks the party information using the party's endpoint. And once it gets details, it can return the access token. And with that access token, then on the delegation endpoint, it can ask, okay, is ABC Trucking allowed to access data from container C? If you remember the first step, Banana and Company did register at Ask Me Anything that ABC Trucking is allowed access to data from container X, Y, and Z. So it does check out in that sense. So it says yes, or well, as I explained to you in the request response model, it actually flows in the similar format. The response to Warehouse 13. And of course, that's also a JSON, so it is a signed JWT again that is sent to the service provider. So the Authorization Registry, when it sends this response, it is a signed JWT, right? Now, the Warehouse 13 has the authorization evidence. It checks it out, and because it's a signed JWT, it also checks if it is valid. And it is signed by the proper certificate from Ask Me Anything. And based on the request, it checks, okay, if there is a permit. If it is permit, then of course it sends the container data, which is requested by the ABC Trucking. So this was the example of a machine-to-machine interaction, how it takes place as per iShare or the part or the roles who have to implement this. These are the steps they need to follow, right? Then I hope that is clear to everyone. Then we move into the extension of this use case, where now driver from ABC company, ABC Trucking Company, is at the premises of the warehouse, and it needs access to the warehouse premises. So here you can see that the participant, of course, the Banana and Company, is the entitled party. The Warehouse 13 is the warehouse where it is the data provider or service provider. The driver X is the trucker of the ABC Trucking Company, who is part of the data consumer or service consumer. Here there is this Authorization Registry or Registry X. Secure Logistics is the identity provider for the driver X, right? So as I explained this. So again, here the first step which happens before any kind of transaction can happen is that Banana and Company gives rights to ABC Trucking, which we also saw in machine-to-machine case. So if it is already given, it doesn't need to give that permission again, but this is just to make the use case complete. I'm specifying it again here. The next step is also that the ABC Trucking itself also authorizes its own employee that it can act on behalf of Banana Company, and this can be based on the policy of that organization, that which trucker gets assigned to which client, it can already provide in policy of that kind. For simplicity's sake, we are using the same authorization registry here. But remember that authorization registry is a role, and every participant can have its own authorization registry. So in this case, ABC Trucking could also be using a different authorization registry than Banana and Company. but to keep it simple here, I've reused it, right? So once the delegations or authorizations are registered, now the ABC, the driver also has the ETA, so it needs to reach to the warehouse 13 to get access to the container, so that it can pick it up and transport it for Banana and Company. So driver X reaches at warehouse, and it is at the gate, and it needs to identify itself, or it wants to get access to the premises, so it can pick up the container, right? So but first, of course, at the gate there is a check. So warehouse wants to know who the driver is, who is picking up this container. This all can happen, say for example, on a mobile app. So at the gate, the warehouse could have a QR code which the driver has to scan, for example. Then it automatically asks, okay, first choose an identity provider with which you can identify yourself. That could be the flow, right? So the driver selects secure logistics, for example, because it is its identity provider. So then warehouse 13 then asks secure logistics. This, by the way, this flow is based on OpenID Connect. So it redirects the driver X to the secure logistics portal where it can identify itself. But while it is redirecting, it is already including the details of the warehouse 13, which is also signed, so that secure logistics knows who is connecting to it. I mean, which organization or service provider is connecting to it. And secure logistics performs the checks of the certificate and the JWT, which is sent to them. And if everything validates, it's again the similar process to as we saw earlier, that it can also check the JWT was signed by warehouse 13, and that JWT, it also needs to check if warehouse 13 is a registered participant or not, so that it can know, okay, whether it can serve this service provider under ISHA terms or not, right? So it gets the access token from satellite, it checks the details of the warehouse 13, and it can ask for the details, and it gets the details of warehouse 13. Then when everything checks out, it says, okay, you can proceed. So it asks first now the driver to log in or identify itself. This can be simple username password, but this can be also multi-factor authentication, depending on the level of assurance that is needed. So it asks for login, and then there is a login. This is a typical OpenID Connect flow. Then it sends the code via the driver portal to warehouse 13. Based on that code, it can ask for an access token. The warehouse 13 can ask access token of secure logistics, and secure logistics can give that access token because now it's on the code based on the secret code that was sent. Once the access token is there, the warehouse 13 can specifically ask for details of this user using the user endpoint, which is also defined in OpenID Connect. And it sends out the details. Okay, this is driver X from ABC Trucking. Of course, there are more parameters it sends, but keep it simple here. It identifies and validates it is driver X, and it is from ABC Trucking. So now warehouse 13 has enough information about who is at the premises. Then next thing it needs to check is whether this this driver is allowed access to any of the containers that it has. So it has to check with the Authorization Registry. So again here, the first flow is that it gets the token. Sorry. So it connects to Authorization Registry, Registry X. And it generates a client assertion, which is a signed JWT, and sends it to Authorization Registry. Authorization Registry does the check. It checks the certificate, it checks the JWT for its validity, and it also wants to check if warehouse 13 is known satellite, but before that it also gets a token from i4Trust satellite. It asks for the details of the warehouse 13, and it gets a detail of the warehouse 13. Everything checks out, then it can issue an access token to warehouse 13, and using that access token, it can the warehouse 13 can get asked for delegation or the authorization of the driver X, and it can check, okay, is this driver allowed to get access to container on the for Banana and Company, because that is what driver is claiming that it wants to get access to. So it does ask that, and because it was registered earlier, the registry says yes. It's as a signed JWT it provides to warehouse 13. And based on that signed JWT, the warehouse 13 validates if the JWT is okay, and the certificate used for signing is okay. And then it allows the access to the warehouse premises for this driver. So then that driver can access the container. So these are the two examples or walkthroughs of the fictional use case, what is enabled. Of course, there are a bit different flows possible, but you get the idea that how the identity and access management is determined, or how it is specified, and how it enables trust in the data space, even for parties who have never connected to each other. If they all connect with the standard APIs, then they can perform these checks and share data. Further useful links, of course, this slides would be shared with you, so you can further read on the concepts that I just explained, and of course this recording of this session will also be made available to you. So this is for a further reading. And that's it from my side, and I will now give the floor to Alvaro to continue on the next part of the session.
Okay, thank you, Rajiv. Please let me share the screen. Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. I'm Alvaro from Ficos. I will present the different components that implement the identity administration management components from i4 with the i4 compatibility stuff that should be used for running the i4Trust experiments. Sorry, because so sorry for the introduction, but the first thing is to explain the different components that the firewall provides for this task. So the first component is Keyrow, that is the responsible of the identity management part. This component, amongst other standards, implements the OAuth2 and the OpenID Connect standards, also the EIDAS standard framework. So with the current stable version, this component is not supporting the i4 specification, but we have some experimental support, and that also is going to be merged into the official component and repository and so on in the near future. So you are going to be used it. At this moment is playing the role of the identity provider that has been explained by Rajiv. So we are working on providing the feature about the Authorization Registry, so you can store here the policy regarding who can access the different services of the provider. And this is more or less the idea behind Keyrock. The other main component is API Umbrella. This API Umbrella component is an open source API management platform that allows you to add some capabilities to API services. For example, access control, rate limiting, accounting, analytics, and so on. In this scenario will be used mainly for protecting context broker instances, but can also be used for other kind of services or other app interfaces. In the same way that the KeyRock, this component is being extended to complete with the ICER specification, is in the work and is going to be released official version with this support. And until this happens, we had to use, we have some repos, so you can build those softwares by hand, but the idea here is we provide some Docker images. Currently, the Docker images are the ones that are here in the slide. I provide here for reference, but we will provide details about if we make some update or when this is officially released. Those Docker images can be used using plain Docker, Docker Swarm, Kubernetes. We also provide, I have another slide, but it's at the end, providing some links to the current, we use hand charts templates that can be used for deploying those components on a Kubernetes platform, okay, cluster. So the idea is that you don't have to create everything from scratch, but you have some templates that can be customized to your needs. Okay. In this sense, more or less, this is a kind of example of what has to be deployed for having a node compatible with the ICER satellite and that can be used for the i4Trust experimentation. So we have some components that are, for example, the databases that we are using Elasticsearch, MongoDB, and MySQL, but also the other components that are conforms this scenario. I have not said nothing about the Authorization Registry. Currently, we use some instances that are provided by the ICER Foundation. So we had to use that for at the moment, and in the near future, this will be a KeyRock instance. So in this scenario, the PEP-ROSI and PDP components are provided by KeyRock. Using API Umbrella, and the identity provider is KeyRock. You can provide a portal that is created using your technologies and wherever you want. The ICER satellite is used for providing the trusting about the participants in the scenario. Okay, so if you plan to deploy i4Trust node, the first thing is you need you need to be registered as a ICER party in ICER satellite. There is a ICER satellite for testing. So the thing is that at the end, before being able to configure API Umbrella and KeyRock to provide these capabilities, you need a set of assets, for example, the private key to sign the Json Web Tokens and the certificates that should be trusted by the ICER satellite, so be a registered participant. Also, this means to have some credentials because for accessing some of the portals for providing the policies and so on, you need credentials, and there are a different set of configuration tiers here. For example, you have two-factor authentication, so this can be found into the ICER documentation. but the idea is that you have to have access to those services because you will need to review the policies and so on. Also, they have API interfaces. So, for example, in the marketplace are using the API interfaces for registering the policies into the authorization registry. But at the end, for testing, you will need the credentials, so you are able to review that everything is working as expected. As I said, you can contact Rajiv for requesting those credentials and to be registered as a participant. Okay, so I'm providing here more or less a summary of the configuration that are required for setting up Keyrock. As I said, I'm going to show it just after providing more or less the details, but you have some configuration. For example, you have to provide the URL of the ISS Authority instance you are going to connect the Keyrock service to handle the trusting and so on. You have also to provide the ID, the participant ID that you have been assigned to you. So you have to provide here the ORI ID that has been provided, and also the credentials. Here I'm providing the details regarding how to use this as files, but it's also possible to provide the private key and the certificates in PER formats using DLD, the IDM, PR client key environment variables without the underscore file, so you don't have to provide a file. So in the case, you will provide the value DLD. Also, there are some other details regarding the authorization registry. This is more or less some examples. So you have here some examples of the values, and I will share one of the links are this repository, the useful links that provide more the templates for configuring this. So you have here a README with the details about how to use those templates and the commands that you have to use for deploying it. And also here you have the files with the configuration. So for example, as we have seen the Keyrock stuff, you have here all the environment variables that have been used. Those configuration are only the ones related with configuring or setting up Keyrock with i4Trust, but there are other environment variables. I have also provided the documentation of the official Keyrock instance, so you have a overview of all the environment variables that can be used. And in any case, in the GitHub repository with the Helm chart templates, you have some description about all the settings that can be used. So you have more information regarding it. Also, well, more or less, after you configure this Keyrock with those configurations, you don't have too much things to do with the Keyrock because as you see in the presentation from Rajiv, the flows are organized to don't require some of the steps that are usually required on OpenID Connect flows. For example, when you use normal OpenID Connect flows, you have to register. I'm going to share to show a Keyrock instance that I have for demos. I cannot use the one from the i4Trust environment because as Juanjo said, the cloud infrastructure has broken. So I'm using one of Demos portals. So here we have Keyrock services. We have here the normal OpenID or OAuth application that have been registered in this Keyrock portal. These steps are not required because in this scenario, because the application don't need to be registered before accessing or contacting the identity provider using the ISER specification. So in this sense, the most important part in this portal is the administration of the users. So you have, if you are an administrator, just when you deploy the record and the Keyrock instance, there is a setting for providing the credentials for the administrator, and also you can create more administrators. So the idea is you have this panel where you can create new users and remove and so on. So you have here the management of that user list. Okay, so this is the important part because the rest of the features are already set up and will work out of the box. And there is also support for signing up users. Well, this can be disabled by using themes, and also if you don't configure a mail relay or mail service, you are not going to be able to provide this feature because it requires sending emails and so on. Okay, so more or less, and this is everything regarding Keyrock. So this is a simple portal in this sense. The next step is configuring API umbrella. Once again, this is more or less a summary for you to have an idea of what has to be provided. Because you have the GitHub repository with the templates, but in the end you have to provide here in this configuration objects, you have to provide the identifier for the API umbrella instance. So you are going to have only one ID for Keyrock, and for it will be the same for Keyrock and for your API umbrella for your node. Here you can configure a root CA certificate. I think that this will be removed in a future because the trusted CA certificates are provided by the ISER satellite. So the idea is to retrieve the list of root certificates from ISER satellite. But you can provide here. This is required for validating that the Json Web Token that is provided is signed by a trusted certificate. But as I said, this will be improved in a near future. You have also to provide the private key and the certificate in a change regarding the client. Happy, in this case, the Happy Pets, the certificate you have been assigned or you have created, and details regarding the local authorization registry. This will be more detailed when Dennis made the presentation regarding the proof of concept and so on, because the idea here is you have a local authorization registry that is used for when you are creating direct policies, but there are also delegation policies. So there is also support for querying third-party authorization registries to fully check that, for example, a delegation is is valid, and so on. So this is the one. This is the configuration regarding the local authorization registry. Okay, this is instead of using environment variables, this is using a API configuration file, but as the other thing, this is also provided in the help chart templates. So it's not only you don't need to create this by hand. Otherwise, you want to use another technology for deploying your services. Okay, so for describing more or less who API Umbrella works, in this case, the credentials of the API Umbrella of the initial administrator is provided the first time you enter in the API Umbrella web page. I can also do this because I have already configured instances, but I don't have any new. So the idea is that when you enter the first time, you are provided with a form for creating this administration user. Okay. I don't know if this is going to be too much. Okay, so this is one API Umbrella instance. You have to use this path, the admin login. Once you have created this administrator user, you can. Sorry. I don't know what happened. Okay, demo of it. Okay, so the API Umbrella has two kind of assets that are API backends and website backends. For these experimentations side, we are more interested on the API backends side. So you have here, you can have a multiple list of API backends. In particular, I think that we probably will only use one, but it has support for different backend API interfaces. So you can create here an API. You have to provide a name. You have to add the server that is the one that is going to be responsible of providing the API interface. So if you have a Docker Swarm or a Kubernetes, this will be a local container that will be or pod that will be in charge of providing the real behavior. In this case, for example, we can use Orion interface. Okay. No, sorry, you don't have to provide the schema. So you can add several if you have different instances. Then you have support for switching the host header. In reality, it's better to leave it untouched. So this is the correct configuration because this is the host header that is going to be sent to the backend when a request comes to the API Umbrella, because API Umbrella is acts like a proxy. So you have to provide okay, in fact, for example, contest is the name or a better name for the contest broker machine. So the idea is to provide here the domain that is going to be public. Okay, you can also you have also to provide some matching regarding prefix. So you can. In this case, we are just telling that the context of Plafy EU at the road path is going to be served by the the Orion local backend with a prefix slash, so you can make some transformation on the path. Okay. Regarding i4Trust, the important thing is to enable here the authorization mode about the context broker attribute-based ISR compliant. Okay, after you enable this, a umbrella will validate the Json Web Tokens that he received for authentication for credentials using the ISR configuration. Here, the automatically board and so on is because there is some section regarding sub-URLs. You don't need to use it. So this is because all the policy is retrieved from the authorization registry. So you don't have to configure here nothing more. For example, there are the default, so the default authorization is based on roles. Here you have input for providing roles, but as I said, you don't have to fill this because after you enable this mode, all the authorization is based on the policies that are stored on the authorization registry. And first, from the local authorization registry, because in any case, if you delegate, if there is a delegation policy or not, don't matter, because you have to first validate that the initial delegator is authorized to do that. So you have always a request to the local authorization registry, and you have the policy here. Okay. So I have said this. So, Rajiv had presented us and detailed who the generic policies can be written. This is just a simple policy. In this case, we have that the issuer is the packet delivery company that has this ORI identifier, and the target of the policy is the not cheaper company. So this document is affecting the not cheaper company, and the issuer is important. When you have delegations, the policy issuer is not the company. In this case, the idea is that the provider is only the packet delivery company, so it's the root of the trust. Okay, so the other thing is that this is linked to a context broker policy. So currently, this is the way the policy are mapped to the context broker policy. So in this case, we have that the resources are the entities. So in this sense, we are telling that this policy is affecting the delivery order entities with, as said by Rajiv, you can use wildcards. So in this case, we are telling that we are providing support for, the action is get. So the policy is setting that not cheaper can read all the entities with any identifier and with any of the attributes of those entities. Okay. The other thing is the important part is that the effect is permitted because can be in the other side can be denied. But this is more or less a simple. This is a simple in the presentation that Denise will make. Will provide more advanced policies, but this is more or less the idea regarding how to configure the policies on API umbrella. Well, in the authorization registry, this has to be provided and upload to the authorization registry. So in the case on Dennis, this will be done by the marketplace with the different components and in an automatic way. So in your case, you can make use of the API interface to create these policies, or you can add by hand some of those policies in the authorization registry by accessing the web interface by hand. So the idea is that those components are ISER compatible, so you can read the ISER specification and follow the different steps, but I wanted to provide here some example for providing a login page on your application. So the idea here in this example is to be able to create a portal that will have a login button, and this is the change that the different steps you require to do for being able to log in a user from a particular identity provider. So in this case, you will have a web application that will have a sign in button. You have probably combo box with all the identity providers that are provided by the ISER satellite, and you select one of them. So in this case, we have selected the IDP from the Happy Pets company, because this is the audience. So the first step is to create a Json Web Token. This is a Json Web Token, but in the code form. You have here the certificates associated with your party ID and so on. You have to provide them, and you have to sign this JSON Web Token using the private key associated with this certificate. You have also to provide some details that are here regarding some steps of the OpenID Connect, for example, the scope, regulatory, and so on. Okay. Once you have this JSON Web Token and is in a signed format and encodes in base 64, you have to provide it on the request parameter on the when using this request. This is one of the additions of the ISER specification, because the normal flow will use a get to the authorized endpoint. But in this case, we are using a post because we are providing the JSON Web Token and so on. Okay, so in this way, you don't need to create an application on the keylock on the identity provider that you are accessing. Just to provide the JSON Web Token in the request, and the identity provider, in this case Keyrock, is able to validate that the JSON Web Token has all the details that are required. There is a specification provides some requirements. For example, you have to provide the issuer field and so on with a valid theory, and the certificate is had to match. So not only the certificate has to be valid and trusted, but also had to be linked with the data that has been provided in the JSON Web Token. So the idea is you make this pull request. If everything goes well, Keyrock will return OK status code, and will provide a location header. You will have to work on with a normal authentication form. You will this location URL will be need to be the one you redirect the browser to. So the user is provided with the login page of Keyrock. In this case, the user provides the credentials, and consent the application to obtain details from Keyrock. This will provide the authorization code to your web page. Sorry, because I don't have too much time, so I want to faster in these sections. So after you receive the authorization code, you have to make a request to the token endpoint. Here again, there is a difference because you have to provide the Json Web Token, and this is different. This is new from the ICE satellite, but it's more or less the same than the OpenID Connect flow decision code. Once you have made this request, you will be provided with a access token that will be used for accessing the API on the access associated with the access identity provider, and also an ID token that can be used for retrieving some details regarding the user and so on. Okay, here there is a list of further readings and useful links. Remember the ones for deploying the components, that is the main in this case. There is also some example themes for Keyrock, so you can add some branding to your Keyrock instances. The template is the Helm charts are also based on some basic fireware charts. We have an i4Trust branch. Also, if you plan to create an application using Node, we have a passport that is a library for using OpenID Connect with the changes required for using the ICE specifications. Also, don't forget to read all because at the end, what we are doing is implementing the ICE specification. So all the ICE specification also applies to them, or at least is the base for all the features that have been added to Keyrock and API Umbrella. So sorry, because this I had to provide these details in a fast way, but I think that you have any question, you can ask us anything. But I think that at least the initial details are there. So thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions and so on.
Thank you, Alvaro. Unfortunately, we don't have questions. We don't have time for questions right now, but if people would like to, they can post them during the Q&A session. And for now, I would say let's take a break of 10 minutes. So we will resume at 10:38 for the next session on the i4Trust marketplace. Thank you very much for your presentation, Alvaro, and we'll see you in 10 minutes, everybody.
Thank you all.
Welcome back. Hope you could grab a coffee or enjoyed the break. For the next 80 minutes, we're quite happy to have Francisco de la Vega to talk to us about the i4Trust marketplace. So please take it away, Francisco.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Francisco de la Vega. I am CTO of FiCodes, which in the context of the i4Trust project and in the context of fireware in general, we take care of the marketplace component. And this is what we are going to review in this presentation. First of all, this is the agenda we are going to follow during the session. I will start with an introduction about the Business API Ecosystem Generic Enabler, which is the name of the software that we have in fireware in order to develop this kind of marketplaces we are going to show. Then I'm going to move to some concepts that are relevant within the context of the Business API Ecosystem software. and that are relevant for you in order to know what kind of things you can create and what kind of things you can do with this software. Then we are going to move to the i4Trust context, and we are going to talk about the marketplace in i4Trust. And finally, I would like to finish with some step-by-step guide in order to show you how you can publish your data in this marketplace. Okay. So first of all, we can start with the Business API ecosystem software. The Business API ecosystem software is a generic enabler from the Fireware infrastructure, which is basically a tool that allows you to create digital marketplaces. It supports the creation for digital marketplaces for the monetization of any kind of digital asset. It is not focused to a particular asset. We are talking about data, but we are also talking about services, or we are talking about files. So it's a general purpose tool for the creation of marketplaces of any kind of digital asset. And what it is offering is the tools and the software for the management of the life cycle of the different product offerings, from the product creation and registration to the monetization, including the billing, customer payments, and also revenue sharing in those scenarios where there are multiple stakeholders involved in a particular offer. It is fully integrated with the Fireware Identity Management Framework, so you can use Fireware identity and data usage policies from Fireware in order to control the access to the different monetized assets. And one important point from this tool is that it is not only a Fireware component, but it is also relying on a set of standards APIs that has been defined by the Forum organization. Well, one important thing regarding the Business API ecosystem component is that it is fully customizable in two different ways. It has support from branding and theming support, so it is possible to create different look and feels for this marketplace. And also, it is supporting multiple identity providers. Of course, we are supporting identity providers from Fireware, which is the keylog that has been presented in previous presentation, but we are also supporting integration with Keycloak, Identity Manager, and in case you have a very simple scenario, it is also possible to use implement the login with GitHub. Okay, but the important point here is that the Business API ecosystem is able to monetize any kind of digital asset. But how is this achieved in production? How is this really done? The point is that the Business API ecosystem core only deals with all that kind of features that are common to any kind of monetization scenario. So product creation, pricing models, licenses, service level agreements, all these kind of things, which is common to any scenario. For those specific features that are only applying to the specific digital asset you are monetizing, it is possible to load within the Business API ecosystem different extensions. Each extension represents a particular digital asset type that is going to be monetized. For example, it's not the same if your product is a query to a context blocker, so you are offering NGSI data, for example. In that scenario, you will, when you create the product, you will need to validate that the user has permission to publish that specific data set, that this is really an NGSI endpoint and it's not whatever. And when it is acquired, you have to grant the different permissions in order to access to a context blocker, etc. Than the simple case where you are uploading an Android application, where you only need to validate that you have uploaded an API key, and when you buy, you have to download. That is completely different. So that specific validations and that specific activations are done in these plugins, which defines a couple of handlers that you can implement and code for validating and activating your service, and that can be loaded within the Business API ecosystem software. Okay, as I said, the Business API ecosystem is dealing with common part, and one of the most important parts are the management of the pricing. The Business API ecosystem supports 3 basic price models. Of course, you can create free offers in case you want. There are 2 ways of making an offer fully free, which are free offers. So basically, users will need to buy your offer, even if it is free. So they are not paying, but they need to buy it. Or it is possible to create open offers. The open offers are quite useful, for example, for open data, when there is not the need of buying. If an offer has been created with an open model, then the monetized stuff can be accessed directly. even for anonymous user. It is not need to buy. And for paid models, we have 3 basic price models. We have the one-time payments, typical you pay and you get, quite simple. Then we have subscription models, which is the typical recurring model, 1 fee per month or 1 fee per year, this kind of models. And we are also supporting pay-per-use, where the actual amount to be charged is taken from usage records that need to be generated, and with that usage record, the actual amount to be paid is calculated. One important thing is that for pay-per-use, the handler, in order to get this usage information, is also taken from the extension. There is a specific handler in the plugin model that allows you to code a client for your usage endpoint, so you can submit the usage information into the Business API ecosystem software. And these 3 basic models can be enriched with advanced models, which basically allows you to provide an extra price model. For example, you can create a subscription fee or a pay-per-use model with an initial fee that is only paid on acquisition time, or it is also possible to create some dynamic stuff. For example, you can create pay-per-use models with 2% of discount if the user has made more than 10,000 calls, and this kind of advanced models. Okay, the Business API ecosystem software, it's also dealing with basically the terms and conditions that apply to the different offers. The Business API ecosystem is supporting providing the license, the terms and conditions that need to be accepted when the offer is acquired. There are a couple of different ways in order to provide this different license. It is possible just to provide a text. I mean, you can provide a free text with the terms and conditions, but in the specific case of data, the Business API ecosystem has some built-in existing licenses that you can just choose on, or there is also some kind of wizard where you can create a custom license, but checking if whether it is going to be exclusive or not, whether it is going to be available just in a region, or whether it can be used for commercial purposes or not, these kind of things. And it is also possible when you are creating offers to provide which are the service level agreements that are going to be satisfied by the offer. Okay, and well, the final feature regarding the Business API ecosystem is this stuff that of revenue sharing models. Revenue sharing models are a way that the Business API ecosystem has for providers to establish how incomes generated by a specific set of offers need to be distributed. So this, the provider of the offer is able to create a revenue sharing model. They can add any number of stakeholders that they want, that are involved in the offer, and they can establish using percentage what amount of the income generated by a set of offerings need to be paid to the different stakeholders involved in the different offers. Okay, so this is the introduction to the Business API ecosystem. Basically, the main concepts that that are around the generic enabler itself, and now we can move in detail to the different models that we have within the Business API ecosystem and the general concepts that we have here. We can start with catalog elements, basically the products, offers, and these kind of things you create. We have 2 different ways of classifying your products in order to enable potential customers to discover them. It is possible to have categories. The categories are created by the system administrator. So you as a provider cannot create categories. They are part of the system. And you can use the different categories in order to categorize your offers. So they can be easily searched by the customers of the system. But in your side, as a provider, you can also create catalogs that enable you to decide how your offers need to be grouped in the search window in order to discover them. So categories are created by admins, or catalogs are created by providers. Okay, then continuing with this catalog elements, we have all the stuff that is related with the products. Here you can see that we have a couple of things. It's not only the offer. On the one hand, we have the asset, which is the real digital stuff that you are going to monetize. It is the service, it is the file, it is the real stuff that you are selling, basically. And then this asset is linked with which in the TM Forum model is called a product specification. The product specification is all the stuff and all the definition of product-related information that is linked to the asset in the system. For example, it includes which are the product description, which are the product characteristics, which are attachments that you can add to the product. For example, an image, you can provide, for example, documentation in PDF or these kind of things. Nothing related with business. So the product specification is a description of the asset that you are going to offer. And then we have the product offering, which is the definition of the business-related stuff. So it includes the link to the product specification that you are going to sell, obviously. And then it also includes in which catalog the product is going to be published, which categories apply to the offer, which are the license and the terms and conditions, which are the SLAs that apply to the product, which are the pricing models that has been provided for the offer, and which is the revenue share model that apply to the offer itself. And one important point here is that this separation exists in the marketplace. So there is not a one-to-one relationship between product specification and product offer. You can offer the same product specification in multiple product offerings. So you are able to provide different price model according to the different terms and conditions and the different licenses. So you are able to play a little bit with the pricing, taking into account the actions that the final customers can do with a specific product. Okay, then once you have all this catalog stuff, another important point is the ordering stuff, which is basically the models that are managed in the system in order to buy things. Again, we are managing two different objects. We have the order concept, which is the acquisition. You can buy multiple offers in a single time. So orders can include a list of products, offers that has been acquired. And basically it includes who is the customer, which billing profile is being used, and all these kind of things. And then we have something which is called the product. That is a concept that comes from the inventory management API from TM Forum. It may look a little bit strange, but this stuff, the product, is an instantiation of an acquired product. So this product object includes the product you have bought with your chosen options. For example, if a product specification has characteristics that you can choose, for example, the update rate, for example, it can be a characteristic that can be chosen. The product is going to have which is the updates rate that you have chosen. Also, the price model can be chosen. An offer can define multiple pricing models, and the user who is buying can choose which price model best fits their needs. And this is also something that appears in the product object. And also, it includes the rate of charge made by the customer. Basically, all the money that the customer has paid for the particular product. So it's an instance of the acquired product. In addition to this, as I said, the business API ecosystem software supports pay-per-use. So it means that we need to have in the system usage stuff, which is accounting information that is used in order to fit the different pay-per-use model that may apply to the different offers. In this case, the business API ecosystem defines two different objects that are automatically created from the plugin data, from the plugin handlers, when you define this client to your usage endpoints, which is basically the usage specification. Is basically a type of usage that is supported in the system. So it basically says which are the units and the metrics that are going to be accounted for a specific product offer. And then we have the usage itself, which is called the usage document, which is the actual usage based of an usage specification made of a specific product during a specific period of time. The usage document also incorporates information whether it has been already paid or not. associated to a UC document, you have the data, the information, whether this is an accounting information which is pending to be paid or whether it is already paid. Okay, and the final concepts I would like to share with you are the revenue sharing stuff, where basically we have three things. On the one hand, we have the revenue sharing model, which is the model that establishes how the incomes generated by set of offers has to be distributed. It incorporates which is the amount of the incomes that is going to be retrieved by the provider of the offer, and which are the amount to be paid to the different stakeholders that has been chosen by the provider, and something very important, the platform percentage. The business API ecosystem supports you to create marketplaces that are non-free, in the sense that you can establish that the users using the business API ecosystem can use it for free, but that you are going to get a fixed percentage of all the transactions that happen in the marketplace. This is the platform percentage. It's something that is configured when the marketplace is deployed, and this is something that is added automatically to all the revenue sharing models. Of course, this is something that can be provided or not. If you just said that the platform percentage is 0, then you have a non-profit marketplace. Then we have transactions. Transactions, I think that is quite clear, is all the payment that has been made by customers, but link it to a particular revenue sharing models. And finally, we have the revenue sharing reports, which is basically the result of applying the revenue sharing models that apply to a set of offers into the transactions. So basically includes the amount that has to be paid to the different stakeholders of a given model. Okay, so this has been a lot of information in very few time. So let's talk about the i4Trust marketplace itself. Okay, so the business API ecosystem software is just a firewall generic enabler that can be used to create marketplaces and on these kind of things. But in the context of the i4Trust project, you are not supposed to deploy your own i4Trust, your own marketplace. Instead of that, we have created a global instance of the marketplace where you will be able to sign in and where you will be able to publish your data and make it available to the other participants or the project or the network. In order to do that, what we are using, what we have created for this project is the support to multiple IDPs at the same time. We have integrated the marketplace with the iShare protocol that has been presented in previous meeting. So once you are a valid participant in the network and you have your context broker, you have your own KeyRock IDP, and you have your own API umbrella, you can contact with marketplace administration, and we are able to add your IDP into the marketplace. So you can access to the marketplace and you can sign in using your own identity provider. So the identities you are managing. So using the iShare protocol, we are integrated with all this stuff, and you are able to log in with your own IDP. Well, we are using also the iShare Json Web Tokens in order to authenticate the marketplace in your IDPs, as has been presented by Alvaro a couple of minutes ago. Okay, so this is basically the architecture we have here. We are going to have a global instance of the i4Trust marketplace where you are going to sign in, and then we are going to have the different participants in the network. So when you try to log here, you are going to be redirected to your own identity provider. So how is this working in practice? Well, basically, you access to the marketplace, you click on the sign in button, and you are going to be prompted to the list of all the identity providers that has been registered in the system. So what you have to do is looking for your organization identity provider, selecting it, and clicking on login. What the marketplace is going to do is generating an iShare Json Web Token with the marketplace certificate, and is going to submit it to the identity provider you have chosen in order to authenticate yourself. This identity provider from your organization you have chosen is going to validate the marketplace Json Web Token and the marketplace Json Web Token signature. Is going to create its own Json Web Token, and is going to access the iShare satellite software in order to validate that the marketplace is a valid participant of the network. Once the identity provider has decided the marketplace is a valid participant on the network, what it is going to do is to give the marketplace the URL of your login endpoint. So the marketplace is going to redirect you to your identity provider in order to provide your user and password in the local infrastructure. And then we are following the typical OpenID or the typical OAuth to follow process. So we are going to get an access code, and we are going to exchange the code for an access token. And at the end of the process, we are going to use that access token in order to get your user profile from your identity provider. So you are logging in the marketplace, but with your own identities. Okay, this is from one side. So now we are going to have a global instance of the marketplace, and you are going to be able to sign in this global instance of the marketplace using your own identities. But how are you able to publish your data in the marketplace? In order to do that, what we have done is developing a new plugin, a new extension for an asset type, which basically is defining an asset type which is called NGSILD data service that allows you to publish your data, basically providing the metadata that is needed in order to create a policy, a delegation evidence that is going to be applied to anyone who is going to buy who is buying your offer. So in the first of all, this plugin allows you to provide this data that is needed to create that policy. So it includes which is the URL of your context broker, well, the URL of the API umbrella that is securing your context broker, as has been previously stated, which is the kind of entity or the entity type that you want to offer to third parties, and then the permissions. So what attributes of this entity are going to be retrieved using GET, what attribute of these entities are going to be able to be posted, which attribute are going to be able to be patched, and what attributes are going to be able to be deleted, which is basically the actions that are defined within the delegation evidence. And one final thing is that you can establish which is going to be the duration of the policy. So how many times this policy is going to be valid for those customers that are acquiring your different offers. So in practice, how is this working? When you create a product using this asset type, basically the plugin is going to validate that the provided metadata is valid, so that you are providing something that is really correct for a context broker endpoint, and then it's going to pick all this relevant info and is going to be attached as product characteristics. So all this info that you have provided, which are basically the actions that can be performed with the data you are offered, are going to be published as characteristics, so it can be seen in the marketplace portal for potential customers. And when a customer acquires the offer, the marketplace plugin is going to build a validated Json Web Token, and is going to authenticate itself using the client credential grant that has been presented previously in order to get an access token who is intended to access to the Authorization Registry of the data owner organization. That's it, the organization who is publishing the data, because the data is in your infrastructure. It's not in the marketplace infrastructure. Then the marketplace is creating a new policy, as has been presented before, a delegation evidence, where we are using the metadata, so which is the entity, which are the attributes, which are the actions, etc., and the identity of the buyer organization. And finally, the marketplace is going to submit that policy into the Authorization Registry of the data owner using the access token that has been generated in the first step. One important point here is that the marketplace is not authorizing a particular user. What the marketplace is doing when you are buying this is creating a policy for the whole organization in the infrastructure of the data owner. And what is authorized at this stage is that the buying organization can assign all these access policies to their local users, as has been presented previously. Okay, so the permission of a specific user to do something is validated in the Authorization Registry of the organization who is making the calls. In the organization of the data owner, which is going to be validated, is that the organization a user is belonging to is authorized to access to all this stuff using this policy that we are creating. Okay. Okay, so now if you want, we can move to a quick demo, so we can see step by step how you can publish your own data in this i4Trust marketplace. Okay, so so one sad thing is that I had to deploy this locally, so I cannot use the i4Trust marketplace instance of the global stuff because of this problem we had this morning, but I think that this can do the trick. Well, this is basically an instance of the marketplace with the i4Trust theme. This is the main page of the marketplace. So you can see that there are a couple of options. Here you are presented all the different offers that are available in the system. You can search using text search. There are a couple of filters that can be used in order to sort. And you can also sort using the categories that has been defined by the system administrator of the system, or you can use the different catalogs that has been created by the different providers. So you as a provider, the first thing that you need to do is access the system using your local IDP. In order to do that, you click on sign in, and what you are presented is a list of all the different identity providers that are registered in the system. In this case, for example, I'm going to choose to sign in using Packet Delivery Identity Provider, which is something that you are going to see in the demo session. Okay, so I click here, and you can see that I'm redirected to the specific identity provider, which in this case is a Keyrock instance, and I can sign in with my local identity in my local identity provider. So I sign here. Okay. Sorry for the waiting times, but I had this stuff deployed in locally with Docker, and I have had a lot of RAM consumed with this and the Hermit. Okay, so now I'm within the system. This is my user, and this is how this stuff looks like when you are logged in the system. Depending on the permissions that you have in the system, you are going to see more options here or less options here. If you are not authorized to provide stuff, or you are not authorized to sell things, you are only going to see the home page, which is this page that we have here when you can search for offers, and the inventory page, which is basically where the products that you have acquired are deployed and the product orders that you have made are deployed. Okay. As a seller, so as an organization authorized in order to publish the different offers, you have two extra options, which is the My Stock section, when you can create the catalogs, the product specifications, and the offers, and the revenue sharing section, where you have the revenue sharing models, the transactions, and the revenue sharing reports. Okay. What is that sound? Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do? Yeah.
Francisco, I think we lost your screen.
Since when?
Now.
Just now.
Only a second, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I have here the beep. Okay, so now as I'm a provider and I want to publish my data here, what I need to do is access to the My Stock section. And here in the My Stock section, we can see that we have three different kinds of objects that that we can create. The first thing that we can create are catalogs that can be used in order to group your offers, and that can be used in order to group also by the customer accessing to the system. Okay, so in order to create a catalog, the only thing that you need to do is come in here, clicking on new, providing a name.
Francisco, maybe you want to share your screen.
Okay, so I lost the screen. Okay, so coming back from here, the My Stock section is this one. So in order to create a catalog, you go here to the new stuff, and then you can create. You can also provide a description in order to define the kind of data that you are expecting to publish here. So, okay, and just with this, you are able to create this, you can review it, and you can create it. Okay, so one important point is that this offer is in active state. Okay, active state means that the catalog has been created, but it is still for edition. So you can modify this, you can add product, and you can add offers. But if you go to the initial page, you will see that the catalog is not yet here. So as soon as you decide that you want to make this, it is not this one, it's this one. As soon as you decide that you want to make your catalog and your catalog offers to be available to the customers, what you need to do is changing this to launch it state, and as launch it state, this is now here. Okay, so third parties can look for the offers that you have published. They can see the name and they can see the description that you have provided to the catalog. And well, in a similar way, as soon as you decide that you don't want the catalog and the offers in this catalog to be acquired anymore, you can retire the catalog, changing it to the oops. Okay, this is an interesting stuff. If you see the problem, the issue is that I cannot retire this catalog because there are active offers that can be still acquired. But the idea is that once you have retired all the offers for a particular catalog, you can remove the catalog moving to retire, and then it is going to disappear from the home page, and well, it cannot be used for searching anymore. Okay, so from here you can create your catalogs, and now the first thing that you want to do is creating a product specification. In order to create a product specification, we have this new stuff here, and here we have all the information that we can provide for a specific product. In this case, you can provide a name. Here you can provide your branding. In case your branding is different from your user or your user organization, this is interesting in order to keep this track. And this is an optional identity number. This is used only in those scenarios where you have local ID for the product you are creating, which is different from the ID that is going to be automatically assigned by this. This is, I don't know, typical serial numbers and these kind of things. And then you can also provide a description for your product. It is possible to create bundle products in case your product is made of different parts that can be bought separately. It is possible to create a bundle, so the different parts are going to be products, and then the whole product is going to be a product of bundles. Sorry, a bundle of products. So you can buy it as a single piece. Okay. Then we have the most important things, which is the asset window. In our case, we are creating digital products. And now that we are here, we see this combo box, this select, which is the digital asset type. The digital asset type establishes the kind of product that you are going to register. In our case, I have 3 registered, which means that I have installed in the system 3 different extensions for the marketplace. I have a basic service, which you can see that is very simple. I only need to provide a URL and a media type. This is typical for just a URL pointing to a service, very simple. And then we have the basic file, which is quite useful because it does not make so many validation, but allows you to upload a file as a product. So in case you want to offer a simple app or these kind of things that are going to be downloaded, or even a piece of static data, for example, in a JSON file or something like that, you can upload it into the system providing the media type, and this is the asset that you are creating. But in the scenario that we are using now, we are going to use the NGSILD data service. There is a lot of information, don't worry. Okay, so the first thing that you need to provide is the asset URL, which is no more than the URL of your context blocker. Then in this case, you can see that the media type cannot be selected, is fixed, because this specific asset type only supports NGSI data. And then we have the metadata. We have a flag to establish whether you are going to support or not to delete attributes. Then we have the Authorization Registry ID. This is internal stuff, because as you know, from the time being, the Authorization Registry is not yet implemented as part of KeyRock. So for the time being, the Authorization Registry we are using is part of the ISER protocol. So you need to provide the ID of the Authorization Registry. In case you enable the post attributes, for example, it is possible to establish which are the attributes that can be posted. Is the similar for patch and is the similar for get. So in this case, we are going to enable get and we are going to enable patch, for example. We are going to enable for this attribute to be patched. And we are going to enable, which is the get, all the attributes to be retrieved. Then we need to provide which is the entity type that we want to make available. It can be delivery order, for example. This is the entity type. And finally, we need to provide which is the authorization registry endpoint. For example, we can use this one. Okay, so now we have provided all the metadata that need to be used by the marketplace in order to create the policy during the acquisition time. And I think I missed something. Yes. And we need to provide which is going to be the duration of the policy itself. So now that we have provided all the metadata, we can continue. The characteristics section of the product is something that you can use in order to provide any kind of information you think is useful in order to describe which is the product itself. So if you add a new characteristic, I don't know, this is easy to be said with something like the color, for example, but you can say that it is gray. Okay. In addition to this, you can add multiple values. In case you add multiple values, what is going to happen when the user is going to buy your offer is that the user is going to be prompted to choose what characteristic they want. I mean, if you have something which is gray or blue, the user will be able to choose whether they want the product in gray or blue. Okay. This is a very stupid example for a data, but this is just for you to know that you can create this kind of thing. So you can create the characteristic. And okay, then you can provide attachments for your product. The most simple and extended attachment that you should provide is the picture that can be provided with a URL or can be uploaded. For example, I think that I have something here. Okay, so is the picture that is going to be used, and then you can upload a couple of files that are going to be presented as attachment. This is useful, for example, in case you want to upload documentation. Imagine that you are providing a service or you are providing a data service, and you have a PDF document, very nice PDF document describing which is the data, which kind of stuff you can find in the service, and this kind of thing. You can upload it using this option, and you can make the PDF available to the potential customer. One important thing is that this is public. So if you upload an attachment, it can be downloaded by anyone. So don't upload something that is private as an attachment to a product. If you want to upload something, use an upload asset. Okay, if you want to upload something private. And the final thing that can be created is that it is possible to create relationship between products. Basically, well, this is only for information purposes, but you can establish that a product is a dependency of other product, or in case you are creating something new, you can establish that is a migration or a substitution of a different product and all this stuff. And well, once you have provided all this information and you have the product in the system, the last step is reviewing this, where you can see, okay, this is the name, the description that we have provided, the image and all this stuff, and you can create and create. And now your product is created, okay? One important thing is that this is similar to the catalog. Now this is inactive state. Inactive state means that it is a draft. So it is not yet, or it cannot be yet made available to the potential customers of your system. Okay, so this is just a draft. And well, we can review the information that we have here. If we go to the characteristics, we'll see that we have this one that we have provided because yes, and then we have all the information that has been taken from the asset. So you can see that the entity type that we are offering is this one, that we have enabled the patch permission to these attributes, and that we have enabled the get permission to this specific to these attributes. The location of the context blocker is here, and the media type of the asset is a fireware NGSILD. Here you can also play with the attachments and with the picture and with the relationship. Okay, if you want to add a new version of your product, you can always upgrade this. If you use the upgrade stuff, what you are going to be prompted is the form of the asset. You are going to be asked to provide which is going to be the new version and which is the new metadata for your version. Okay, so since we want this to be published, we move it to launch it. Okay. Okay, now, as I said, as I described when we were talking about the different concepts around the Business API ecosystem software, you may notice that I have only provided information relevant to the asset, but I haven't provided any kind of business-specific information yet. If I want to create that and make it available to be bought, what I need to create is an offer. Okay? In order to create an offer is something that we have here, and you will see that this similar form, but only with the business-specific information for the offer. So, data offer. You can provide a description for the offer, also a description. And you can provide also places. In case your product is only available on third times location, you can add them here, for example. Okay. It is also possible to create offer bundles. This is quite interesting because the offer bundles are intended to sell a couple of offers with a single price model. So the typical use case for creating an offer bundle is when you want to offer a discount in multiple offerings are acquired in a single point. For example, you may have 3 data services, each of them with an offer, and each of them with a price model. Then you can create a bundle, add the 3 data services as an offer bundle, and offer a pricing that is better than adding the 3 pricing by separate. So it's like an offer. You can buy all of them, and if you buy 5 or 6 stuff, then your pricing is better. This is the typical use case for offering bundle. Okay, so the most important thing that we need to choose now is which is the product that we are going to sell. In this case, we are going to sell my cool data product. Then we need to choose in what catalog we want to publish this data offer. In this case, we are choosing this one that we have created. Okay, then we can choose which are the categories that apply to the offer we are creating. In our case, is NGSI data. Characteristics are a tree. Sorry, categories are a tree. So it is possible to have nested categories from more fine grain to less fine grain. This is something that you can choose, whatever. This has been created by the system admin. And then you have to provide which are the terms and conditions that apply to the offer you are buying. You have a couple of options. If you are using some kind of, or you are publishing some kind of open data, for example, you may decide that your data is fully open and you may create a free offer for that, but you want the people who is going to access to the data to accept the license of the data before they can access to it. Then you can choose a standard open data license, and then you can pick any of this one, like the attribution no commercial, no derivative, or whatever. If you want to create something custom, you can use the wizard for custom license, when you can provide a title and a description for the license itself, and then you can select the clauses from whether this is going to be exclusive or not exclusive, which is going to be the region, whether this can be for all purposes, only research or only commercial purposes, the sector that it can be used, the time frame where this can be used, and whether you have the right to transfer the data or not. And if any of this is okay for your terms and conditions, you can always create a free text license with whatever title you want to provide and whatever description and clauses you want to provide. As something simple, I'm going to choose, for example, this one. Okay, then you can provide, or you can define metrics that your offer is supposed to satisfy. You can try to define a new metric, and then there are 3 things that you can choose for creating a new metric, which is going to be the update rate. For example, you can guarantee that your data is going to update it 5 times a day, or that the response time is going to be maximum 100 milliseconds. I don't know, all these kind of things. And then we move to the most important stuff that you have to provide for your offer, which is the price plan or the price model. By default, it is asking whether this is an open offer or not. In our case, this is not open. Okay, so now we are creating a price plan. When you add a price, when we add a price plan, we have to provide a name for it, and then the type of pricing model that we are providing. For example, we can create a fee. And I don't know, 10 euros. You can provide a description in case you want, and you can create this, and then you have established that one of the price plans that can be chosen is the single payment one. But you are not limited to a single price plan. You can create new ones. For example, we can create this one, and we can also create a pay-per-use price plan where we are going to charge €1 per API call. So the users, if they are going to use the system a lot, maybe for them it is better to pick the single payment, and if they are just going to make very few calls, maybe for them it's better to choose the price plan. Okay, apart from this basic model that we have from the plan, it is possible to add to the plan which is called price alterations, which are 2 different things of price, 2 different kinds of price alteration. You can just add another price component, for example, a one-time payment. So you can add 10 euros payment, and with this, what we are doing is that we have a pay-per-use. Sorry, we have a pay-per-use price model where we are also adding an initial fee of 10 euros. So this is an initial payment, and then the rest of the usage of the service is going to be based on the actual usage made by the customer. But you are not buying only to these fixed price alterations, but you can also create some dynamic stuff. For example, you can specify fees So stuff that is dynamically added to the final payment based on a certain condition, or discounts, which is money that is removed from the final payment based on some dynamic conditions. This can be fixed, so it's a fixed amount that is discounted when you made more than 10,000 calls, for example. With this, what we are saying is, I'm going to remove 10 euros from whatever pricing you have if you are more than this number of calls. Or, which is more typical, is saying that you are giving a 2% discount, that you are going to give a 2% discount each time the user goes over 10,000 calls. This condition applies to this unit, okay? Okay, so here you have your price alteration and your single payment stack. And the final thing that you have to choose is which is the revenue sharing model that is going to be used for distributing the incomes of this offer. I haven't created any one, so I have only the default one, which in this specific scenario, in my local environment, I have it configured to a platform percentage of 30% and a provider percentage of 70%. In the real scenario, we will have a 0% of platform percentage, and you will get a 100% of the platform percentage. Okay, but this is the default revenue sharing model. Okay, so now we have this. We can review all the data. We have the basic information. We have the status. We have the description, and well, all the data that we have provided. So now we can create this. And now we have our offer. If we go to the agreement section, we will review which is the license, which is the service level agreement, and which is the price model that we have here. We can also review which is the categories, and then we can also review which is the basic information. And the final thing I need to do in order to make this public to potential customers is launching the offer. So now that I have launched the offer is here, okay? So now potential customers will be able to search for your offer using the categories or the most specific categories, or they can look only for your catalog, for example, and all these things, okay? So now that the offer is published, maybe what we can review is how the customer is going to see the stuff when trying to buy your offer. And basically, this is the offer we have created. Here we have the cheaper price model of those price models that you have chosen. And when I click on Add to the Cart, you will see a couple of things. First of all, we have a tab, which is including the characteristics of the product, where we can review all the characteristics of the product that we are offering. In the particular case, where you have provided a characteristics that can be chosen, you can select which of the values of the characteristics you want to use. Then, very important, you have to accept the terms and conditions. Without accepting the terms and conditions, you are not able to buy nothing. So you have to accept this. And the final thing is that in case you have provided more than one price plan, the price plan can be chosen by the final user. So me as a user, I can choose if this is going to be a single payment or if this is going to be a pay-per-use model. So I can add it to the cart. And now in case I could buy this stuff. I cannot do it because I have created the offer. So I cannot buy my own stuff, okay? Okay, so this is from the point of view of the offering creation. We have plenty of time yet, so maybe we can review the revenue sharing thing just to give you some information about this. But basically, the revenue sharing section is where you can create different revenue sharing models, review your revenue sharing transactions, and have a look at the different revenue sharing report that has been generated for you. You can see that the revenue sharing model is something that is quite simple. You only have to provide a product class that is the name of the model as it is going to be displayed in the offering creation section. Model. And then Here you can review which is the platform percentage that is configured for the system. This is something that you cannot modify. This is fixed by configuration, and here then you can provide which is the percentage that you want to take. In this case, you can see that we have 30 and 70, so this is equal to the default model. You can always pick a 50%, and then we have a remaining 20%, and I don't have any other stakeholder. Okay, great. In this section, in this second section, you have a remaining 20% that you can assign to any other user in the system. Okay, so this way, when you apply this revenue sharing model to the different offers in the system and they are acquired, the incomes are going to be distributed in this way. You are going to get a 50% of the total money. The owner of the marketplace is going to get a 30% of the total money, and the stakeholders that you have chosen are going to get a 20% of the remaining money. Okay, so from my side, that's all. So I don't have extra content because, well, this step by step is just a description of what we have. So this is all from my side. We have a couple of time, so half an hour, I guess. So how shall we proceed with this remaining time? Shall we close or?
Well, perhaps we can see if anybody has any questions that they can share in the chat that are directed to you. Mm-hmm. There hasn't been any yet, but perhaps since we have extra time, somebody decides to pop it in the chat.
Okay, the chat. The global chat or the question section?
Would be in the question section.
Mm-hmm. We have here something from Gernot. Is there is a reason why put is spared out of the marketplace product definition, and yes, API also offers put calls? Yeah. One thing is what you can do with at the end of the day with the context blocker. So in the context blocker, you can, well, you have the NGSI API and you can do whatever you want. What we are adding as part of the policy is what actions are going to be authorized, but those people buying the offering itself. So if you establish that in the policy that you are going to authorize put to a specific attribute or a specific entity, what means is that that HTTP operation is now allowed for you when you buy the offer.
Hi, this is Alvaro speaking. In any case, NGSILD, that is the version of the API that we are targeting, is not exposing any API endpoint using the put method. So okay, it's not required.
In any case, but the policy is general. I mean, the policy is establishing which is the object, which are the attributes, and which is the permission at HTTP level. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. The demo that is going to be performed by Dennis is going to follow the process. What I have shown you today is the part that it is not shown in the official demo. In the official demo, you start with a couple of offers already created. So I have done this part, which is what you are not going to see. In the demo, you are going to see how a customer is going to buy the things, how when they buy the things, a policy is created in the authorization registry, and how the users of the buyer organization is able to access to the actual data. Well, not really. That depends on the deployment. At this stage in i4Trust, any of them, we are waiting for you to publish stuff. For the recording, I'll mention the question, which is there any estimate of the volume of
financial transactions currently executed via the marketplace.
Yeah, yes, sorry. From the point of view of the financial transactions, there was some estimation that was done a couple of time ago with the revenue sharing system, which is the part of the software which is in charge of this transaction stuff. And I don't remember exactly the name, but a couple of them. I mean, it's supporting a huge number. Take into account that you are not going to execute the revenue sharing model with a 2 euros stuff. You need to accumulate some interesting amount of money in order to make this useful.
Thanks, Francisco. I think we won't get any more questions, and then what I think we could do is we can close the session, but I would like to invite everybody if they want to go to the lounge, and then we can take these 20 minutes since they've already been scheduled for to meet each other and network a little bit. I would also like to invite the speakers for that, and then we can have a bit of a conversation over there.
Okay.
So we'll do that, and please keep an eye on the DIH working group so that we let you know which session we will have tomorrow. Unfortunately, we don't know if we'll have the cluster ready or not, so we will make an announcement by the end of today. So I'll close the session, and we'll continue our conversation in the lounge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.